Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 defensive vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online in 2022. Now I've already done one of these videos this year, however some things have changed. Some vehicles I've realized are not so good, and some vehicles that are new to the game are a little bit better than originally anticipated. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with number 10. At number 10 we of course have the Night Shark. Now the Night Shark is probably one of the best vehicles to start out with in Grand Theft Auto Online. If you guys have done the career builder, the Night Shark is definitely a vehicle that I think a lot of people select, and it's definitely one of the best ones. It goes for about $1.25 million, and for that price it is truly one of the best defensive vehicles. Now the Night Shark is extremely quick for being such an armored vehicle. This thing can take 27 homing rockets from an Oppressor Mark II and 9 RPGs. The Night Shark is also equipped with a front-mounted machine gun. Now this thing is absolutely piss weak. Don't really expect to kill too many things with it. As you guys can see, I mean, it hasn't even killed this Prius yet, which is one of the lowest forms of vehicle on Earth, and it's still alive, and it's just started to smoke now, and it's okay. Now it's gee. You can also equip it with this window plating that you guys can see on my Night Shark right now. However, I don't actually recommend doing this because it disables your ability to shoot out of the vehicle with any handheld weapons, and it removes your ability to throw sticky bombs, both of which are very useful to have. And the defensive plating actually does absolutely nothing protection-wise. It literally just makes it so you're harder to see. But if you play in an auto-aim lobby, you're just going to get blasted straight through it anyway. So I would just avoid the window plating. You can have it. I mean, it looks cool. That's why I have it. So that's it for the Night Shark at number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Next up at number 9, we have the Insurgent Pickup. Now, the Insurgent Pickup Custom is a little bit ahead of the Night Shark because it has a few more defensive features, in my opinion at least. Now the Insurgent Pickup Custom goes for $1.35 million to get the regular Insurgent, and then you will need to upgrade it into the Custom within a mobile operations center or an Avenger. So you will need some other vehicles in order to actually upgrade this thing into the Pickup Custom. So all total, just for the Insurgent itself, not for any of the vehicles you need, it's going to be around $1.6 to $1.8 million to upgrade this thing, which is a very worthy price. Now the Insurgent can take the exact same amount of homing missiles from an Oppressor Mark II that the Night Shark can, and I do believe that it can take the exact same amount of RPGs. However, the Insurgent is better for a couple of reasons. The first reason being, this thing is an absolute battering ram. Now don't get me wrong, you can bash cars out of the way of the Night Shark very, very easily, but the Insurgent is in a different, I mean, you guys literally just saw me blow up a Prius by hitting it. So, I mean, this thing's on a different level. The Insurgent can basically remove anything that's in your way and just hit it to the side. So that's one way that the Insurgent is a little bit better. If you're running away from people, you're not going to get slowed down by, you know, these pesky vehicles like the classy Asias and Karen Futos. They're just going to get battered out of the way and won't be able to, you know, stop you at all. Now, in addition to this, of course, there are more features than just it being a battering ram. You can, of course, drop proximity mines behind this thing if you have the proximity mine upgrade unlocked within the bunker. Now, these are pretty good because, obviously, if you're getting tailed, you drop some proximity mines, and inevitably, you'll hear some explosions behind you. The Insurgent Pickup Custom can also hold 9 players inside of it, and each one of those players, assuming you don't have heavy armor, can shoot out of this thing. So if you have 9 friends, somehow, I don't know who has 9 friends to play GTA with, but if you do, all of you guys can be shooting at people out of this thing, and one of those 9 players can be operating the top-mounted machine gun or upgradable minigun on the Insurgent, which does a lot of damage. Now the minigun, I have heard, is actually way worse than the regular machine gun, so I would recommend just picking up the regular machine gun and just leaving it on it. Now the only reason that I have heavy armor on the Insurgent Pickup Custom is because I usually play with one other friend, and if we're whipping the Insurgent, they're on the gun and I'm driving. And it gives them the best chance of protection with the heavy armor because it has almost a full shield all the way around it. Obviously the front is pretty armored, and the back of the shield is also pretty armored. So you got relatively good defense on the turret. So that's it for the Insurgent Pickup Custom. It's got a lot of good defensive features, but we're going to get into some vehicles that are a little bit more defensively oriented than this. Next up at number 8, we have the Stromberg. Now this thing goes for $2.4 million if you have the trade price unlocked, and $3.2 million if you do not have the trade price unlocked. Now the Stromberg these days is not as useful as it once was in Grand Theft Auto Online. However, it still is a decent defense against Oppressor Mark IIs, Oppressor Mark Is, and pretty much anything in the air, or really anything on the ground. Now the Stromberg is a little bit faster than the Insurgent and the Nitrix both, however it has a little bit less armor, but its weapon systems are quite a lot better. Stromberg literally has the best mounted machine guns in the entire game. As you guys saw, I just absolutely destroyed that Futo. We'll destroy this Prius as well. It's just, okay, yeah, these machine guns are absolutely cracked, and they're at a pretty good height, so you don't shoot underneath the car, you kind of hit center mass on the car. On top of that, the Stromberg also has what I believe are the most aggressive tracking homing missiles in the entire game. They're also pretty quick. Now, the Stromberg does have a relatively short lock-on distance, but because the missiles are so good, it doesn't really matter. If an oppressor's coming at you and they're spamming missiles, and you're also spamming missiles as soon as you possibly can, you will more than likely win the fight 90% of the time. Now, the Stromberg doesn't have the best armor, especially in comparison to some of the vehicles we just went over. It's only possible to take 2 RPGs in the Stromberg, however it can take 6 homing rockets from an Oppressor Mark II, so you will be able to survive for a little bit within the Stromberg. However, the Stromberg does also have one more trick up its sleeve. The Stromberg is of course one of only 2 cars in Grand Theft Auto Online that are submersible. So if you're getting tailed too hard and you need to get away from people, if there's some water nearby, you can of course take the Stromberg and just go underwater. And then it turns into a full-blown submarine, as you guys can see right here. It's even got the little propellers and everything, it's got the fins, and it's relatively agile underneath the water, surprisingly. There you have it, that's pretty much it for the Stromberg. Let's move on to number 7. Next up in number 7, we have the Avenger. Now the Avenger goes for $3.4 to $4.8 million depending on upgrades and trade prices and stuff like that, so it is a relatively expensive vehicle. The Avenger is very unique because it does operate like the mobile operations center. You can have some good workshops in the back of this thing. Like I said, you can upgrade the Insurgent within the Avenger, as well as upgrade some weapons and things like that. Now the Avenger is of course a helicopter and a plane all at once, but the Avenger is a very tanky aircraft. As you guys can see right here, I'm going to slam this thing directly into the ground, and as you can see, it hasn't blown up. And as a matter of fact, we're actually just going to take right back off from the ground. The Avenger is kind of a rare aircraft in that aspect that it can just hit the ground at full speed and be completely fine. I don't believe any other aircraft in the entire game that can actually do that, except for maybe the B-11. The Avenger also has all of these turrets on it. As you guys can see, there's one underneath the rear wing, there's one on top of the vehicle, and of course there's one below the nose. These turrets are very good for defending the Avenger. Now the Avenger does have a slight problem with it though, and that is the armor on this vehicle is very inconsistent. Sometimes the Avenger can be really armored and take an absolute ton of damage before it blows up, and other times the vehicle can get destroyed almost instantly as soon as it takes any damage. But more often than not, I do feel like this thing can take quite a lot of damage before it actually blows up. For the most part, it is relatively well armored. So that's pretty much it for the Avenger. It's a semi-useful defensive vehicle. Is it the one that I recommend the most? Absolutely not, but it could be much worse. Let's move on to number 6. Next up, we have the Bravado Half-Track. Now this thing goes for $1.7 million with the trade price unlocked, or $2.3 million with the trade price, obviously not unlocked. The Half-Track is a very slow vehicle, but it definitely has its purpose, that's for sure. The Half-Track definitely does have a purpose though in Grand Theft Auto Online. The first good defensive feature is of course this roller that you guys can see mounted on the front of the vehicle. You can use this to slam vehicles out of your way. It actually just kind of knocks them right out. The Half-Track can take the exact same amount of homing missiles as the Insurgent Pickup Custom and the Nitrix. It can take 27 homing missiles before it blows up. But beyond that, it is a little bit better for defending yourself against bullets. Now, if you guys don't know what I mean, the Half-Track is very unique in one aspect. Now, it might look like the Half-Track has a pretty big front window. However, what you will notice about this thing is if you shoot at it, the window may look like it breaks. However, the bullets are not actually getting through. For example, if I was sitting right there and my head was right there and I just kept shooting, I would not get hit, not even one time. It doesn't matter what you use, it doesn't matter if you use the minigun, it doesn't matter if you use the Widowmaker, doesn't matter if you use FMJ rounds, nothing is getting through the front windshield of the Half-Track, which is pretty crazy. Now what you do have to worry about are the side windows. Even though there is armor plating right here, and even if there wasn't armor plating, you can still just get spammed right through here. So if you're in an auto aim lobby, you gotta watch out for that. However, from the rear of the vehicle, you also cannot be hit. The Half-Track is really good for defending the driver and the passenger. But what about the gunner? Well, As you guys might have noticed, this thing does have a mounted machine gun on the back of it. Now, I only have the dual mounted machine gun. You can, of course, get a quad mounted machine gun. This thing does an absolute ton of damage. It makes the Stromberg's machine guns look absolutely pussy. So it is pretty nice. And if anybody messes with you and you have a gunner on your half-track, they're pretty much done for. It doesn't really matter what you're in. This thing deals out so much damage, it's really hard to survive against. And if you have the quad cannon, it's even better. Now, the half-track does have one more feature that I have yet to mention, and that is, of course, this thing can also drop proximity mines, very much like the Insurgent Pickup Custom, and they'll kill civilians or anybody else who's chasing you. And you will get chased in the half-track because it is, unfortunately, an extremely slow vehicle. That's it for the half-track. On to number 5. The next best defensive vehicle that we have is, of course, the Kasatka submarine. Now, you can pick this vehicle up for as little as $2.2 million. However, you will have a pretty bare bones equipped submarine, and you won't be able to do everything that I show in this video. The Kasatka is very, very good defensively, in my opinion at least. The first good defensive option is the ability to fast travel in the Kasatka. For example, I can fast travel to any of these places for only $2,000, and that is because I've completed the heist, I do believe it is. So for only $2,000, I can go from, say, Chumash to the complete opposite side of the map. So if there's anybody chasing me, I can get away from them pretty much instantly, simply clicking this, and then next thing I know, after this cutscene, I'm on the other side of the map. Now, the Kasatka can dive to a maximum depth of about 500 feet below the ocean surface, so if you want to hide from people, that is a pretty good way to do it. And on top of that, the Kasatka will also go off the radar once it is underwater. Now, the Kasatka has a few more defensive features than this. For example, you can get on these cruise missiles, and I know that technically cruise missiles are kind of offensive, but if you ask Obama, I'm sure we can label these as defensive. So if there's anybody trying to infringe on your freedom, you can, of course, absolutely nuke them with one of these. Like this mule, he's infringing on my rights, and now he's not. And of course, on top of this, you also get access to the Periscope missile launcher. This thing's pretty good for taking out oppressors and oppressor Mark IIs that are coming after you. It does lock on, and you can fire these missiles like pretty much they're completely spammable, and they do have relatively good tracking and okay speed, and if you just keep shooting at an oppressor for long enough, you will eventually kill them, but it might take some time. So that's pretty much it for the Kasatka at number 5. It is a pretty good defensive vehicle, kind of an underrated one I feel like as far as defense is concerned. That's it for number 5, and we have a really good segue into number 4. At number 4, we're still inside my Kasatka, but we of course have the Toreador, or the Toreador. I don't know how people want me to pronounce it, but I pronounce it both ways so nobody can get mad. Now, the Toreador, as you guys may be aware of, or maybe not, this thing is another submersible vehicle. It's the other submersible car that I mentioned when I was talking about the Stromberg. So you can exit the Kasatka with the Toreador very, very simply by doing this. And of course, you can store this thing inside your Kasatka as well, I guess I should mention. Now, the Toreador is a little bit less controllable underwater than the Stromberg in my opinion. However, it does have one major advantage, and that is this thing has a boost both underwater and above water. Now, of course, when the Toreador is on land, you can get access to these front-mounted machine guns, which are not quite as good as the Strombergs, but they are pretty, actually, you know what, I think they are as good as the Strombergs. I didn't think they were, but I'm pretty convinced they're just as good for sure. Yeah, nobody has a chance. The front-mounted machine guns are really good. In addition to that, it also has missiles. Now, I do believe that these missiles on the Toreador are a little bit weaker than the Strombergs. However, I do believe that the lock-on distance on the Toreador is a little bit better, and I do believe that you can spam fire these things maybe a little bit quicker than you can with the Stromberg. I could be wrong on that though. Now, like I said, the Toreador also does get a rocket boost, which allows this thing to get away from enemies really, really fast. And of course, get to the sea even faster so that hopefully you can just dive into the water and run away from whoever is attacking you. The Toreador also does have about the same armor as the Stromberg. It can take about 6 homing missiles, maybe 8 depending on where you get hit, and it can take about 4 RPGs. It's about double the RPGs, and it's a few more homing missiles, like I said, depending on where you get hit. Another advantage with the Toreador is it is, of course, a 4-door, so you can carry around 3 other players instead of just 1. Now, this thing does go for a pretty hefty cost of $3.6 million. It is worth the money, I would say 100%, because against oppressors, or pretty much anything that you can lock onto, the Toreador will almost always win. So that's it for the Toreador. Let's move on to the next best defensive vehicle, and this one is a new one. Next up at number 3, we have the Obey Omni EGT. This thing goes for about $1.8 million, which is a relatively fair price considering just what you get with this vehicle. It is of course all-wheel drive, and it is of course electric, meaning that it gets an extremely good launch off the line, and it has very good acceleration up to a pretty piss-weak top speed. However, what makes the Obey Omni EGT very good is of course this vehicle is equipable with Imani tech, which means you can have a missile lock-on jammer equipped on this thing for the low price of like almost $500,000, which is that's fine. Now this of course does make your vehicle obviously immune to being locked onto, which is very nice. Now the thing that makes the Obey Omni EGT better than a lot of the other Imani Tech vehicles, for example all of the OG Imani Tech vehicles that were added with the contract DLC, is this thing's armor is pretty much doubled. Now instead of having bullet resistant windows on the Obey Omni EGT and also having the front mounted machine guns, you can now instead take 6 RPGs without even having the armor equipped on this vehicle. It can just take 6 RPGs straight with no armor. Or it can take 3 homing missiles as well with no armor. But if you put the armor upgrade on, like you guys can see is on mine, this thing shoots up to being able to take 12 RPGs and 12 homing missiles before it dies. Now keep in mind, homing missiles are not going to be able to actually lock onto you when you're driving this car. And of course RPGs could never lock on. I would argue that this thing could take more missiles than 99% of vehicles in this game. So that's pretty nuts. It is at the cost of having bullet resistant windows, but bullet resistant windows get broken after 15 shots anyway, so if you're getting shot at by a minigun, they're gonna last about 1 second. So the Obey Omni EGT, in my opinion, is actually probably the best Imani Tech vehicle in the game right now in terms of just pure defense and armor protection. And for only $1.8 million plus the upgrades, it's not a very bad price to pay to be protected. So that's it for the Obey Omni EGT. Let's move on to number 2. The second best defensive vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online is the Akula. Now this thing goes for between $2.8 million and $3.7 million depending if you have the trade price unlocked or not. Now the Akula is a very defensively oriented vehicle. It is of course an attack helicopter as well, but that's besides the point. Just talk to Obama again. Now the Akula has a very unique ability that is almost exclusive to this vehicle, only there is actually one other vehicle that has it, but the Akula is much better. And that is of course stealth mode. So if I press H on keyboard, I'm now in stealth mode. Now this of course is a pretty unique feature, the ability to disappear from the in-game radar instantly, meaning I can travel around without anybody seeing me on the expanded map in the pause menu or the mini map is a pretty huge defensive feature. Say you are in a fight and you hop in your Akula and you're trying to get away from some people, simply go into stealth mode and they can no longer see you on the minimap. Now the Akula is also able to defend itself adequately. It is equipable with homing missiles or a 4 missile barrage within the hangar, so you will have some missiles to back you up no matter what. It is also equipable with a bomb bay, and of course you can drop bombs on innocent civilians, or I mean people that are trying to infringe on your rights and people that are trying to ruin your day and attack you. That's who you can drop bombs on. The pilot also does get access to dual side-mounted miniguns on this thing. These are not very good though. I would kind of recommend not using them. And the co-pilot gets access to an optional dual-mounted or single-mounted front machine gun, which they can control and they can aim themselves. And it's pretty good. It's decent against players and AI, but it's not really good against vehicles or anything. But it's still nice to have nonetheless. The Akula is also a 4-seater, which is pretty nice. You and 3 other players can move around on the map without being seen once, and that's kind of a huge defensive feature, honestly. So that's pretty much it for the Akula. This is a great helicopter. It's also one of the fastest helicopters in the entire game, so getting away from other helicopters is going to be pretty easy in this thing, I have to say. So that's pretty much it for the Akula. Let's move on to the #1 best defensive vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now the #1 best defensive vehicle in the game is of course the MOC, or just the MOC in general, but in order to get the MOC cab, you're going to need the MOC. This thing can take 70 Oppressor Mark II homing rockets and an absolute ton of RPGs, tons of gunfire, all of that sort of stuff. On top of that, the MOC cab is also a relatively quick vehicle, and one of the best things about the MOC cab arguably is your ability to back people down like Shaq in the post. Obviously when you're reversing this thing, there's absolutely nothing that people can shoot through from the back. However, you can of course pull an AP pistol, aim it at people, and shoot right out of the back of this thing without being shot back at yourself. So that is pretty huge. Now the MOC cab is really good and all. There's really nothing wrong with this, and I do absolutely recommend picking it up. However, there is one vehicle that is slightly better than the MOC cab when it comes to defense. This is, of course, the Canon Seminole, and it goes for $30,000. The Seminole is a little known vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online, and something that people don't understand about the Seminole is just how well armored this vehicle is. On top of that, also the fastest vehicle in the game. It is actually the third vehicle that can travel underwater like the Toreador and the Stromberg. It is also capable of autonomous flight, but the reason it's on this list is its ability to take 700 trillion homing rockets from an Oppressor Mark II. Now, of course, in order to be able to do this, you are going to need to upgrade it with Imani tech within the agency, which is really hard to do. It does cost a bit of money, but it is 100% worth it. The Canon Seminole is absolutely pretty much invincible. I've never been killed while driving it. It is really hard to make this thing explode. Occasionally, I guess it might happen, but for the most part, the Canon Seminole is just the best defensive vehicle by a long shot. So definitely pick one of these things up. They are 100% worth. So there you have it, guys. Those are the top 10 best defensive vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you found it useful or helpful, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.